The ocean was calm that morning, the kind of calm sailors usually welcome. The sky was clear, the wind was steady, and the fishing boat moved slowly across the endless blue of the Pacific. For the crew, it seemed like just another ordinary day at sea. But by the end of that journey, their story would become one of the most terrifying survival tales ever recorded. This is the story of José Salvador Alvarenga. In November 2012, Alvarenga left the small fishing village of Costa Azul, Chiapas, located on the Pacific coast of Mexico. He was an experienced fisherman. For years, he had made his living the same way, heading into the ocean on small boats, catching fish, and returning a day or two later with enough to sell. That morning, he wasn't alone. A young fisherman named Ezequiel Cordoba joined him on the trip. Cordoba was only 22 years old. He had little experience at sea, but the job promised quick money, and the weather looked safe enough. Their boat was small, only about 7 meters long. It had no cabin, no real shelter, just a motor, a few fuel containers, fishing gear, and a large icebox meant to store the catch. The plan was simple: head out for a day of fishing, fill the boat, return home. But the Pacific Ocean had other plans. At first, everything went well. The two fishermen began catching sharks, tuna, and other fish quickly. By evening, the boat was already heavy with their catch. But then the wind started to change. Dark clouds appeared on the horizon. Within minutes, the calm sea transformed into a violent storm. Massive waves began crashing against the small boat. The rain poured endlessly. Visibility dropped to almost zero. And then the worst thing that could happen happened. The boat's motor stopped working. They were now drifting in the open ocean, with no engine, no navigation, and no way to contact anyone. At first, they believed the storm would pass and rescue would come. After all, fishermen disappeared for a few hours sometimes. Search teams usually found them quickly. But the storm lasted days. The current carried their boat farther and farther into the Pacific Ocean. Soon, they were hundreds of kilometers away from shore. Their radio had been damaged. Their GPS stopped working. They had no idea where they were. And slowly, their food began to run out. The first days were the hardest. Hunger came quickly, but thirst was worse. They had no fresh water. Under the burning sun, dehydration became a serious threat. Then, Alvarenga had an idea. Whenever rain fell, they used buckets and containers to collect the water. They drank every drop, sometimes even licking rainwater from the boat's surface. But rain didn't come every day. Sometimes weeks passed without a single drop. When that happened, they were forced to do something desperate. They began drinking turtle blood to stay alive. Food was another challenge. Without fishing equipment that could work while drifting, survival required creativity. They started catching fish with their bare hands. Birds sometimes landed on the boat. When they did, the fishermen grabbed them instantly. Raw fish, raw birds, even jellyfish. Nothing could be wasted. The ocean had become both their prison and their only source of survival. Weeks passed, then months. The boat drifted endlessly across the Pacific. The sun burned their skin. Salt water covered their bodies. Their clothes slowly fell apart. But the psychological battle was even worse. Cordoba, the younger fisherman, began losing hope. He couldn't accept the situation. He stopped eating. He cried often. He spoke about his family constantly. And one day, he became extremely sick. Without proper food or water, his body simply couldn't continue. After about 4 months at sea, Cordoba died. For Alvarenga, the moment was devastating. Now he was completely alone, thousands of kilometers from land. with nothing but the endless ocean surrounding him. For days, he stayed next to the body of his friend. He talked to him. He apologized. He cried. But eventually, the smell became unbearable. With a heavy heart, he pushed the body into the ocean. From that moment on, the silence became his greatest enemy. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Sometimes he saw ships on the horizon, but they were always too far away. Sometimes planes passed above him, but none ever noticed the small drifting boat. The ocean was simply too vast, too empty, too indifferent. To keep his mind from breaking, Alvarenga created routines. He spoke to the stars. He counted the days. He imagined conversations with people from his past, anything to keep his sanity. Then something strange began happening. The ocean current carried his boat farther and farther west, across one of the largest oceans on Earth, the Pacific. Without knowing it, Alvarenga was drifting across thousands of kilometers of open ocean, far beyond the routes of most ships, far beyond the places anyone would search. Yet somehow, he kept surviving. Finally, after 438 days at sea, something changed. One morning, he noticed birds flying overhead, birds that rarely travel far from land. His heart started racing. Then he saw it: palm trees, land. His small boat had reached the remote island of Ibn Atoll, part of the Marshall Islands. He jumped into the shallow water and walked toward the beach, weak, thin, barely able to stand, but alive. Local islanders soon found him wandering near the shore. At first, they couldn't believe what he was telling them. A man drifting across the Pacific Ocean for over a year. But when rescuers arrived, the truth became clear. Alvarenga had lost over 25 kilograms. His skin was burned by the sun. His body was severely dehydrated. Yet somehow, he had survived 438 days lost at sea, one of the longest survival stories in maritime history. Later, doctors and investigators studied his story carefully. Many experts believed survival for that long was nearly impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. The drifting routes of ocean currents, the condition of the boat, the timeline of his disappearance, everything matched against all odds. One man had crossed the Pacific Ocean by accident, not as an explorer, not as a sailor, but as a survivor. The ocean is beautiful, but it is also merciless. Out there, hundreds of kilometers from land, human life becomes incredibly fragile, yet sometimes the human will to survive proves stronger than even the vast Pacific Ocean. And the story of José Salvador Alvarenga remains one of the most incredible reminders of that truth. The ocean has always fascinated humanity. For thousands of years, people have sailed across it, explored it, and depended on it for survival. But the ocean is also one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Out there, far beyond the sight of land, the rules of the world begin to change. There are no roads, no rescue stations, no guarantees, only water, endless, unpredictable, and powerful. For sailors, fishermen, and explorers, the ocean represents both opportunity and danger. It can provide food, travel, and discovery. But it can also take everything away in a matter of minutes. A sudden storm, a broken engine, a moment of bad luck, and suddenly, a simple journey can turn into a desperate fight for survival. Stories of people lost at sea have existed for centuries. Some end in tragedy. Others become legends of endurance. But very few are as extraordinary as the story of José Salvador Alvarenga, a fisherman who never intended to become an explorer, a man who simply went out to work one morning and found himself drifting across the largest ocean on Earth. For most people, surviving a few days alone at sea would already seem impossible. Food quickly disappears. Fresh water becomes the most precious resource imaginable. The sun burns during the day, the cold arrives at night, and the endless horizon slowly begins to play tricks on the mind. Loneliness becomes overwhelming. Silence becomes heavy. Time itself begins to lose meaning. But somehow, Alvarenga endured this reality not for days, not for weeks, but for 438 days, more than an entire year, drifting across the Pacific Ocean. During that time, the ocean became both his enemy and his only chance of survival. It threatened him with storms, hunger, dehydration, and isolation. But it also gave him fish, rainwater, and the currents that slowly carried his boat across thousands of kilometers. Day after day, wave after wave, the small boat continued drifting west, across one of the most immense and mysterious environments on the planet, the Pacific Ocean, a place so vast that entire ships can disappear without a trace, a place where a single human life can feel incredibly small. And yet, in that vast emptiness, one man managed to survive, not because he was stronger than the ocean, but because he refused to give up. Survival stories like this remind us of something powerful. Human beings are far more resilient than we often realize. When faced with unimaginable hardship, the mind and body can adapt in ways that seem almost impossible. Finding food where none should exist. Finding hope where none should remain. Continuing forward even when the chances of rescue seem almost non-existent. That quiet determination, that refusal to surrender, is what allowed José Salvador Alvarenga to endure the unimaginable. Even today, the ocean continues to hold countless untold stories, fishermen who never returned, ships that vanished without explanation, survivors who faced impossible odds and somehow lived to tell the tale. The sea has always been a place of mystery, a place where courage and danger exist side by side, and where every journey carries the possibility of becoming something much bigger than expected. For Alvarenga, what began as a simple fishing trip became one of the most incredible survival stories ever recorded. A journey across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. A journey through hunger, isolation, fear, and endurance. And ultimately, a journey back to land, back to life, back to the world he thought he might never see again. But somewhere beyond the horizon, across the endless waves of the Pacific, the ocean continues to move exactly as it always has, silent, powerful, and full of stories still waiting to be told.